before the evening settles into darkness, before your eyes grow heavy, imagine with me something. There is no rush. The night is long. We have time for this story. You can close your eyes if you like. Nothing here requires urgent attention. Simply listen to what comes next. Imagine a moment of rest before sleep. You are comfortable. The bed beneath you feels solid. The air around you is cool. It feels pleasant. And in this quiet moment, I want you to think about something. Think about books. Think about how they came to exist, not in a dramatic way, simply as a slow process, a careful, repetitive process. It took many years and many hands. What would it have been like if you wanted a book in 1400? Not the way we want things now, where we find them easily, but truly wanted a book, wanted it deeply, the Bible perhaps, or a text for learning. What would that journey have looked like? How long would you have waited? What would it have cost you? And who would have done the work? Let your mind settle into a slower pace. We are going to walk through time, not as observers of history, but as people noticing daily life, noticing what the work felt like, noticing what the rooms looked like, noticing what the sounds were. We will travel slowly through centuries, through careful, patient work. There is a building made of stone. The walls are very thick. Very little sound comes from outside. Very little warmth comes through. The air inside is cool, almost cold. The light comes from narrow windows. They face toward the east, toward the morning sun. Windows are small in these buildings. They let heat escape. They let light escape. Heat was precious in the medieval world. The light that comes in is limited. It is only useful for certain hours. In this building there are people. They are monks. This is a monastery, a place where religious people lived. They lived and worked together. The work they do is the same. Day after day, year after year, they copy books. One of these monks is called Brother Anselm. He has been doing this for 30 years. His back is curved from sitting. The curve comes from decades of work. His hands show dark stains. No amount of washing removes them. The stains are from ink. His fingertips are rough. They are rough from holding a quill. These are the marks of a scribe, written into his body by time, written into him by repetition. But his hands move with steadiness. Only decades of practice create this steadiness. There is no hesitation in his movements. There is no need to think. His hands simply know what to do. He dips his quill into the ink. The ink fills the split tip. The tip is made from a feather. He touches the quill to vellum. A letter appears on the page. He moves to the next position. Another letter appears. Around him, other monks work in silence. They are not together in any dramatic way. They are not working as a team. They are individual monks, each at their own desk, each doing the same repetitive work, each at their own pace. The only sounds in the room are small, the scratch of quill on vellum, the occasional dip of a quill into ink, someone reaching for a new page, the movement of parchment. These are quiet sounds. They create a rhythm. This rhythm repeats through the morning. The morning progresses very slowly. The light gradually brightens. The sun rises higher in the sky. Even so, candles burn at each desk. The light of the candles combines with sunlight. Together they create just enough illumination, just enough light for careful work. The work continues around them. One letter follows another, one page follows another, one day follows another. For the monks who do this work, the pattern is always the same. Wake early, come to the scriptorium, prepare the workspace, prepare the ink, begin writing, continue writing for hours. The work does not vary. The purpose is clear. A text must be copied. A book must be made. Brother Anselm writes slowly. He writes with complete care. Every letter matters. Mistakes cannot be easily corrected. If a letter is wrong, the page might be abandoned. The vellum is too expensive to waste. So the work proceeds with complete attention. No rushing, no carelessness. Every movement is intentional. To complete a single Bible takes approximately 3 years. That is 3 years of this work, 3 years of sitting in this cool room, 3 years of mornings beginning the same way, 3 years of the quill moving across vellum, one letter at a time. Some monks spend their entire adult lives copying texts. They might complete several books in a lifetime. They might complete only one. The materials for making a book are expensive. The vellum comes from the skin of sheep, or sometimes from the skin of calves. It must be specially prepared. The hair is removed, the skin is cleaned, it is stretched and scraped. It becomes smooth, smooth enough to receive ink. To make a single large manuscript, you need many animals. To make a Bible, you need an entire flock. The ink is mixed fresh each morning. Iron salts are combined with gall. Gall is a substance from oak trees. Water and gum arabic are added. The ink must be mixed in specific proportions. The result is a dark brown. It becomes black as it dries. The smell of it is distinctive. The monks know this smell very well. They know it as well as the quill in their hand. The quill pens are made from goose feathers. The feather is split at the tip. It holds ink when split this way. Every few pages the nib wears down. When it does, the monk must cut a new split. He must sharpen the point again. This is constant maintenance. The tools must always be ready for the work. Outside the scriptorium, the world continues. In the villages beyond the monastery walls, people work. Farmers work the fields, craftspeople practice their trades, merchants trade goods. But for the vast majority of Europe's population, something is different. The written word is something they encounter only in church. It is read aloud by a priest. Most people never see a written text. The idea of owning a book does not occur to them. Books are precious. Books are rare. Books exist, but they are locked away. They are locked in monasteries. They are locked in cathedral libraries. They are chained to reading desks. They are chained so they cannot be stolen. A book is worth more than most families earn in a year. The materials alone, the vellum and the ink, cost a fortune. The carefully made pens cost much as well. All of this costs more than a laborer's annual wages. Universities exist in Europe. They have begun spreading since the 12th century. But even in universities, books are scarce. Students cannot afford to buy them. So the university has developed a system. A complete text is divided into sections. These sections are rented out to students. Each student borrows a section. They copy it by hand in their own hand. then they return it. It is like a medieval lending library, except every borrower manufactures their own copy. The student must sit and write. Just like the monks in the scriptorium, they copy words they do not necessarily understand. They create a book that they will own. They own it because they wrote it themselves. A priest in a parish church might own a Bible. Most priests do not. The priest reads from the church's Bible. It is the only one in the parish. The people listen as the priest reads. They do not read themselves. They hear the words spoken aloud. Outside the monasteries and universities, books barely exist. A wealthy merchant might own 3 books. These books took years to copy. These books cost a fortune. A minor nobleman might own 1 book. Usually it is a book of hours. A book of hours is a devotional text. It is meant for prayer. It contains prayers for different times of day. It contains prayers for different seasons. It is something meant to be read repeatedly. A personal possession, a luxury item. For the vast majority of European people, something is true. The written word is something they hear, not something they read. The priest reads in church. The people listen. The words are spoken aloud. This is often their only contact with written language. Now let your mind shift to a different place. We are going to leave the cool stone scriptorium. We are leaving the monks bending over their work. We are going to travel to a city built on a river, a city where the work is different, where the tools are different, where precision and skill are valued differently. The city is called Mainz. It sits on the Rhine River. This is in what is now Germany. The river is important. It is a highway for trade. Goods travel up and down the river. The city sits on this river. So it is a place where commerce happens. People meet. Things are exchanged. The city is important for this location, but also because of power. The Archbishop of Mainz is not just religious. The Archbishop is one of only 7 prince-electors. These 7 men are in the Holy Roman Empire. They are the only people who choose the emperor. That makes Mainz one of the most powerful cities. Powerful in the German-speaking world. The Archbishop has political power. The Archbishop has religious power. At the top of Mainz's social structure are families. They are called the patricians. These are old money families. They have controlled the city's most important institutions. They have done this for generations. Among these institutions is the Archbishop's coin mint. The mint is where coins are made. It is a place of precision work. The people who run the mint are not scholars. They are not clergy. They are men of metal and money. Families whose wealth comes from striking coins. They understand alloys. They understand casting. They understand critical tolerances. The same image must be stamped over and over. It must be stamped without distortion. Imagine the coin mint on a working day. There is a furnace. The furnace burns hot. The air is thick with heat. Metal is melted in the furnace. It becomes liquid. The liquid metal is bright, almost white from the heat. A craftsman pours the molten metal into molds. The molds are made of bronze. They are shaped to form coins. The metal flows into the mold. It takes the shape almost instantly. It begins to cool immediately. The color changes from bright white to orange to gray. The cooled metal is removed from the mold. It is now a blank piece of metal. Rough, not yet a coin. The blank must be placed under a punch. The punch is a hardened steel die. An image is carved into it. The image might be a face. It might be a crown. It might be a crest or seal. The blank piece of metal is placed on an anvil. The punch is positioned above it. A hammer strikes. The force is enormous. The metal deforms. The image is transferred from the die onto the blank. The die is lifted. The coin now bears the mark. But the edges are rough. Shavings must be filed away. The surface must be smoothed. More work, more care, more precision. The men who do this work do it hundreds of times a day. By afternoon, the first station has produced enough metal. By evening, finished coins are stacked in wooden boxes. Each coin is the same. Each one bears the same image. Each one is the same size and weight. The consistency is remarkable. Done by hand, done by repetition, done by skill. One family controlled part of the mint. They were called the Genslich family. They had wealth, they had position, they had power in the city. Around the year 1394, a child was born. The child was born into this family. The child would later be known by a different name. He would be known as Gutenberg, Johannes Genslich Gutenberg. This child did not grow up around books. He grew up around metal. From his earliest years, he was immersed in the world of precision metalwork. He watched the punches used to stamp images. He watched the molds used for casting. He watched men blending alloys. They tested the properties. They understood how different metals behaved. They understood behavior under heat. They understood behavior under pressure. Every technical skill for printing came from this. He absorbed the skills in the family trade. This is the way knowledge passed forward. Knowledge did not pass through books. Knowledge did not pass through schools. Knowledge passed through living. Knowledge passed through watching. Knowledge passed through doing the work. Alongside people who had been doing it for years, the knowledge entered his body. It entered his hands. It became part of how he thought about problems. A young person would watch an older craftsman day after day, year after year. The older person would not explain everything. There would be no instruction manual. The younger person would simply observe. Gradually, the movements became familiar. The timing made sense. The precision required became clear. The skill was absorbed through osmosis, through practice, through repetition. Gutenberg learned about metallurgy. Gutenberg learned about metal casting. He learned about molds. He learned about precision toolmaking. He learned the critical tolerances in his family's work. He learned how to heat metal to the right temperature. He learned how to pour it at exactly the right moment. He learned to know when the metal was ready. He learned to know this by touch, not by sight, by touch. He learned to work with precision. He learned to notice small differences. He learned that one small mistake could make an entire piece useless. By age 12, Gutenberg could perform any station in the mint. He could judge fire temperature. He could pour metal evenly. He could stamp without distorting the image. He could finish coins with minimal waste. But more importantly, he understood precision. He understood tolerance, the acceptable variance in a process. He understood alloys. He understood how metals behave under heat. He understood how tools should be maintained. He understood that quality work requires attention. Attention to infinite small details. This is the knowledge Gutenberg carries with him. He does not know it yet, but it will become everything. But the city that gave him these skills took something away. Beneath the surface of Mainz's prosperity, a tension had been building. This tension had been building for many years. The guild craftspeople wanted more power. The merchants wanted more representation. The tradespeople wanted a say in how the city was governed. But the patricians refused to share power. They wanted to keep control. They wanted control the way their ancestors had controlled it. This tension between those who had power and those who wanted it had been escalating. This had been escalating for decades. The breaking point came in stages, starting around 1411 and continuing through the 1420s. The situation in Mainz became increasingly unstable. The guilds rose against the patricians. At first there were meetings, there were negotiations, but these failed. Street confrontations began. These turned into organized political action. Patrician families who had held power for generations were stripped. They were stripped of their privileges. Some were expelled from the city council. Some were physically driven out of the city. The Genslich family was among them. They lost their position. They lost their place in the city's power structure. They lost the connection to the mint. The mint had sustained them for generations. The details of exactly how they lost their position are not entirely clear. Historical records are incomplete. But what is known is this: the family lost their power. They had to leave the city. They relocated to a smaller town. The town was called Eltville. It was about 15 miles west along the Rhine. It was in a wine-growing region. The family connection to the mint was gone. The connection to the city's institutions was gone. The position that had defined them was gone. A boy in this family watched something happen. His family became invisible, not in a dramatic way. It was simply how life changed. One day, his family held power and position. Then gradually that began to slip away. Then it was gone. He was too young to fully understand, but he could feel it. He could observe it. What does it feel like to lose everything? To have your family's identity stripped away, to be an outsider in the city where your ancestors ruled. For a patrician family, the identity was tied to place, tied to institutions, tied to position. Strip those away, and what remains? A set of technical abilities without a context. A man who knows how to work metal with extraordinary precision, but who no longer has a mint to work in. The knowledge remained. The position to use that knowledge was gone. This loss shaped young Gutenberg. He had watched his family become invisible. He had experienced the instability of political position. In later life, this experience would make him secretive. It would make him careful. It would make him protect his innovations. It would make him reluctant to depend on any single patron. The exile taught him that visibility was vulnerability. The most valuable thing you could have was something no one else could replicate, something you kept private, something you controlled. The young man now called Johannes Gutenberg essentially disappeared from historical records. This was after his family left Mainz. He disappeared for about 15 years. There is almost nothing documented about what he was doing. There is almost nothing about where he was living. There is almost nothing about what work he was engaged in. This silence is itself revealing. It tells us that Gutenberg was not a public figure. He held no church office. He held no political post. He produced no scholarly work that was circulated or cited. He was a private man. During these years, he likely learned. He practiced the metalworking skills his family had taught him. He observed. He experimented. He developed expertise in working with metal. He developed expertise in understanding alloys. He developed expertise in creating precision molds. He worked quietly. He worked alone or with a few people. He worked without seeking recognition. He worked without drawing attention. There is a single entry in a university register. The entry is from around 1418. It might refer to him. A Johannes Gutenberg is recorded. This is a Latinized version of a name. The name is connected to Mainz. He is recorded as enrolled at the University of Erfurt. This might be Gutenberg, it might not be. No one knows for certain. If it was him, this is our only evidence of any formal education. If it was not him, then we know nothing. We know nothing about his intellectual formation. This happened during these crucial years. This absence from the historical record is important. It tells us something about the man. He was not seeking recognition. He was not building a public reputation. He was living quietly, learning, observing, developing skills that would not be visible. After nearly 15 years of this quiet existence, something happened around the year 1433. Gutenberg appears again. He has settled in a city called Strasbourg. This is another prosperous, free city. It is on the Rhine. It is about 100 miles south of Mainz. Strasbourg had a thriving artisan class. It had a more welcoming political culture. It was more welcoming to outsiders than Mainz. It was a logical destination for a man with his skills. He appears to have supported himself through various enterprises. He knew how to cut and polish gemstones. He had worked with lens grinding. He possessed the metalworker's instinct for tools. He possessed the instinct for precision. At some point, he entered into a business partnership. The partnership was with 3 local men. The arrangement covered several commercial ventures: polishing gemstones, manufacturing small mirrors intended for sale. The mirrors were intended for religious pilgrims. Pilgrims traveled to sacred sites. And a third enterprise that Gutenberg kept deliberately vague. The partners knew this enterprise existed. They had invested money in it. But Gutenberg controlled the details. He shared them sparingly. No one outside the workshop knew exactly what he was doing. He maintained the secretiveness he had learned in his youth. He protected his work. He shared information only with people he trusted completely. During these years in Strasbourg, Gutenberg also began something. He began to think about a different problem. He was observing the world around him. He was noticing things. He noticed the slow process of copying books by hand. He understood from his own experience how long careful work took. He understood how expensive materials were. He understood how many skilled hours went into a single product. He wondered about the monks in their scriptorium. He wondered about how long it took to copy a Bible. He wondered if there might be a different way, not urgently, not with a sense of calling, simply as a craftsman noticing a problem, thinking about it, beginning to wonder if there might be a solution. This was not inspiration in the dramatic sense. It was observation. It was the beginning of thinking. thinking about a different approach to an old problem. Then one of his business partners died. His brothers demanded to be admitted to the partnership. Gutenberg refused. The brothers sued. The lawsuit was heard in Strasbourg's municipal court. This was in 1439. The trial produced a set of legal records. These are among the most important documents in the history of technology. The witnesses called to testify described objects. The objects had nothing to do with gemstones. The objects had nothing to do with mirrors. A goldsmith named Hans Dunn said something important. He said he had earned money from Gutenberg. He earned money for work related to printing. A man named Conrad Sasbach mentioned something. He mentioned being asked to construct a press. Other witnesses described forms and pieces. The pieces were stored in Gutenberg's workshop. Language consistent with a type casting operation. Most significantly, something important happened. When one of the partners fell ill, Gutenberg sent a message. Go to the dying man's workshop. Find a specific piece of equipment, take it apart, make sure that no one can see what it was for. This instruction reveals something important. It reveals something about Gutenberg. He understood the value of what he was building. He understood that knowledge once shared was power, power that could be used against him. He understood that he needed to protect his work. Gutenberg won the lawsuit. The brothers received a financial settlement, but they were denied access to the partnership. They were denied access to its equipment. The venture continued, but the trial had revealed something important. The trial had revealed the outlines of something that Gutenberg had been developing in secret for years. Not mirrors, not gemstones, a system for pressing letters onto paper using cast metal components. What the trial also revealed was a man who understood something instinctively. The value of what he was building, the value lay not just in the technology itself, the value lay in the control of that technology. Gutenberg's obsession with secrecy was not paranoia, it was strategy. In an age before patent law, something was true. Before intellectual property protections of any kind, something was true. The only way to maintain ownership of an invention, the only way was to make sure no one else understood it. No one else understood it well enough to replicate it. The strategy had worked for now, but Gutenberg's project was expensive. Mirrors and gemstones did not generate enough income. They did not generate enough to fund it. Within a few years, he would need substantially more capital. And the man who would offer it would do something. He would ultimately understand Gutenberg's invention well enough to take it away. Let your mind settle into this pace now. We are about to enter the technical heart of the story. This is about solving a problem. It is intricate work, but it is not dramatic. It is careful. It is precise. It is the work of someone thinking deeply about how to make something that has never been made before. To understand what Gutenberg was attempting, you must understand something. You must understand the problem he was trying to solve. It was not a simple problem. It was actually several problems layered on top of each other. And no craftsman in Europe at that time had something. No craftsman had the combination of skills needed to solve them all simultaneously. The idea of printing itself was not new. Woodblock printing had existed in Europe since the late 1300s. A craftsman would carve an entire page of text or imagery into a single block of wood The block would be inked, paper would be pressed against it, the image would appear on the paper. This worked for small jobs, playing cards, devotional images, short religious texts. But woodblock printing had fatal limitations. Each block was a single page. The text or image was carved in reverse. It was carved in reverse so it would print correctly. Once the wood wore down or cracked, the block was useless. You could not rearrange the letters, you could not correct an error. Without carving an entirely new block, producing a full-length book this way would require hundreds of blocks. Each one would represent weeks of skilled labor. The economics made it impractical. What Europe needed was something different. Movable type. Individual letters cast in a durable material. Letters that could be arranged into words, locked into a frame, inked, pressed onto a page, then taken apart, cleaned, and rearranged into entirely different words for the next page. The same set of letters reused endlessly. In theory, a single collection of movable type could do something. It could produce an infinite number of different books. In practice, the challenges were staggering. First, the material. Wood was too soft. It swelled with ink. It warped with moisture. It wore down under pressure. Clay, as craftsmen in China had discovered centuries earlier, was brittle and imprecise. The type needed to be cast in metal, but which metal? It had to be hard enough to hold a sharp letter edge, hold it through thousands of impressions, yet soft enough to cast cleanly in a mold, without air bubbles or distortion. It needed to melt at a low enough temperature, low enough to be practical, yet cool quickly enough to allow rapid production. Second, the mold. Every letter in the alphabet has a different width. An M is wide, an I is narrow. A W takes up nearly twice the horizontal space of an L. To produce type that could be set into even lines, something was necessary. Every letter needed to be cast on a body of the same height, but the width had to be adjustable. That required a mold of extraordinary ingenuity, one that could be quickly reconfigured for each letter, while maintaining absolute consistency in the vertical dimension. Third, the ink. Scribes used water-based inks. These inks soaked into parchment. They soak through capillary action. Water-based ink slides off metal. A new kind of ink was needed. One viscous enough to cling to a metal surface, viscous enough to transfer cleanly under pressure, viscous enough to dry without smearing. Fourth, the press, a mechanism capable of applying firm, even pressure across an entire page. Pressure across an entire page of set type, without shifting the letters, without cracking the paper, without distorting the impression. 4 problems, 4 entirely different domains of expertise. Metallurgy, precision tool-making, chemistry, mechanical engineering. No university taught all of them. No single guild practiced all of them, but a man who had grown up in a coin mint, who had trained as a goldsmith, who had spent years cutting gemstones, who had spent years polishing mirrors, who had lived his entire life in the Rhine Valley, surrounded by wine presses and linen presses. That man just might have something. That man just might have the right combination of skills. Gutenberg had the knowledge. What he had always lacked was money. Consider this. Most people, if you ask them, will say something. They will say Gutenberg invented the printing press. That is the wrong answer, or rather it is an incomplete answer. The press was a piece of the system, an important piece but not the revolutionary one. Wine presses and linen presses already existed. Adapting one to print text was a mechanical challenge, not a conceptual breakthrough. The breakthrough was something else entirely: the hand mold. This is what separated Gutenberg's system. It separated his system from every other attempt at printing that had come before. To appreciate why this matters, consider something. Consider what it takes to set a single page of text, a page of the Bible in Gutenberg's planned format. This page contained roughly 2,500 individual characters, a full Bible, both volumes, all 1,282 pages, required millions of individual impressions. To print even a small edition, something was necessary. Gutenberg would need tens of thousands of pieces of type, each one identical in height, precise in its letter shape, durable enough to survive being locked into a frame, durable enough to survive being inked, durable enough to survive being pressed against paper, durable enough to survive being cleaned, durable enough to survive being reused hundreds of times. Casting those pieces one at a time would take a long time. Casting them one at a time using conventional methods would take years. The hand mold made it possible to produce them in minutes. The device was deceptively simple in concept. Two L-shaped halves fitted together to form a small rectangular cavity. At the bottom of this cavity sat a matrix, a small copper block. Into this block the shape of a single letter had been stamped using a hardened steel punch. Molten metal was poured into the top of the mold. It filled the cavity. It took the shape of the letter from the matrix. It cooled almost instantly. The mold was opened. The piece of type was removed. The process began again. Imagine the rhythm of this work. A skilled worker stands at a bench. In front of him, the hand mold. To one side, a small crucible. The crucible contains molten metal. The metal is at exactly the right temperature. The worker knows this temperature by sight. The metal is cherry red, not orange, not white. Cherry red. He takes a small ladle. He scoops molten metal. The weight is familiar. The heat rises through the ladle handle. His hand has learned tolerance, learning what burn feels like, what is still possible. He pours. The metal flows into the mold cavity, a thin stream. The cavity fills in a fraction of a second. The metal touches the matrix. It takes the shape of the letter. The image of the letter is transferred in real time. The sound is small, a whisper of metal finding form. Cooling happens almost immediately. The bright metal darkens from cherry red to orange to gray. The transformation takes 3 seconds. He opens the mold. The two pieces separate. The type piece emerges. It sits in his palm. Still warm. Not hot. Warm. The letter is perfect. Sharp edges. Precise form. No bubbles. No distortions. The metal flowed correctly. He places the piece on the bench to cool completely. Around him, other workers do this. each at their own casting stations, not sequential, rhythmic, multiple workers, each pouring, each casting, each removing type. The sound is rhythm, repeated, pour, flow, cool, remove, place, pour, flow, cool, remove, place. By the end of a day, something happened. A skilled worker will have cast 400 individual pieces, each one the same shape, each one precise, each one identical in height, adjustable in width, each one ready for the next stage. The genius was in the adjustability. Because letters vary in width, something happened. The two halves of the mold could slide against each other, widening or narrowing the cavity, widening or narrowing it to accommodate an M, widening or narrowing it to accommodate an I, while keeping the height absolutely constant. A skilled worker using this device could cast hundreds of pieces in a single day. Within weeks, an entire working font could be produced. Every letter, every punctuation mark, every ligature, every abbreviation, every variant form of the same letter, used to adjust spacing, all of it could be created, all of it could be ready for use. The alloy itself was another critical innovation. Through years of experimentation, Gutenberg arrived at something, a mixture of lead tin and antimony. Lead provided softness, lead provided a low melting point, tin improved flow, tin reduced shrinkage. Antimony, the crucial addition, did something. It expanded slightly as it cooled, this pressing the molten metal firmly into every fine detail of the matrix. The result was type that was sharp, durable, remarkably consistent from piece to piece. This was Gutenberg's true invention, not a machine for pressing ink onto paper, but a system for producing quickly and cheaply something. Thousands of identical components that such a machine required to function. The ink came next, or rather the failure of existing ink came first. Every scribe in Europe used essentially the same formula. Iron gall ink, made by combining iron salts combined with tannic acid extracted from oak galls, the hard growths produced by wasps on oak trees, mixed with water and gum arabic. It flowed smoothly from a quill. It bonded with parchment through absorption. It had worked well for centuries. It was useless for printing. Water-based ink beaded on metal surfaces. It refused to adhere to the type. When it did transfer under pressure, something happened. It bled into the paper fibers, producing blurred, ghostly impressions. The crisp, black letter forms that Gutenberg needed, these were impossible with scribal ink. His solution drew on an entirely different tradition, not the scriptorium but the painter's studio, oil-based paints using linseed oil as a binder. These had been refined by Northern European painters, refined throughout the 14th and 15th centuries. Gutenberg adapted this approach. His ink combined linseed oil boiled and thickened to the right viscosity, combined with finely ground lamp black. The soot collected from burning oil lamps. The result was a dense, sticky substance. It clung to the raised surfaces of metal type. Without running into the recesses, it transferred cleanly under pressure. It dried to a hard, permanent black on paper or vellum. Nearly 600 years later, something was true. Pages printed with this ink remained intensely black, undimmed, unfaded. The permanence is remarkable. It is the result of a formulation so effective that it remained the basis for printing ink with only minor modifications for the next 4 centuries. The press itself required less invention. It required more adaptation. The screw press was a simple mechanism. A large wooden screw drives a flat plate downward. It drives it with great force. It was one of the most common machines in the Rhine Valley. Every vineyard used one to crush grapes. Every linen maker used one to press moisture from cloth. Gutenberg's contribution was to modify this familiar device, modify it for a new purpose, applying uniform pressure across an entire page of set type, without shifting the letters, without cracking the paper, without distorting the impression. He built a frame to hold the type in place. This frame was called the chase, and a flat platen that descended evenly onto the inked surface. A sliding bed called the coffin allowed the type form, to be rolled under the platen and back out again after each impression. None of these individual elements were revolutionary, not in isolation. The screw was ancient. Oil-based preparations existed. Metal casting was established practice. What made Gutenberg's system unprecedented was the integration, the way each component was designed to work with every other component in a single, repeatable process. Type cast in the hand mold, ink formulated to adhere to that type, a press engineered to transfer that ink, transfer it onto a flat surface, transfer it with consistent pressure, and the surface itself, paper. Paper had been manufactured in Europe since the 13th century, produced from pulped linen rags in water-powered mills. It was cheap compared to vellum, abundant, available in large sheets. The church and the aristocracy still regarded it differently. They regarded it as an inferior material, a commoner's substitute for proper parchment. But Gutenberg chose to print on both, producing luxury copies of his Bible, luxury copies on vellum for wealthy buyers, standard copies on paper for everyone else. It was a commercial calculation as much as a technical one, and it pointed towards something important. It pointed toward the true nature of what Gutenberg had built. This was not merely an invention, it was a production system, the first in history, designed to do something, designed to manufacture identical copies of a written text, identical copies at industrial scale. Every component existed to serve that singular purpose. All he needed now was the capital to put it to work, and the man who would provide it. He was already waiting in Mainz. Around 1448, after roughly 2 decades away, Gutenberg came home. Mainz had changed in his absence. The worst of the patrician guild conflicts had subsided, not through resolution, but through exhaustion. The city had found a fragile equilibrium. The archbishop still ruled, commerce still flowed along the Rhine, the cathedral still dominated the skyline, but the old patrician families had been diminished. The families who had once controlled the mint had been diminished. The families who had once controlled the city council had been diminished. Gutenberg returned not as a man reclaiming his birthright. He returned as a craftsman looking for work. The city had changed. He had changed. The world he knew was gone. He borrowed money. Court records from 1448 show a loan of 150 guilders from a relative, Arnold Gelfus. It was secured against an annuity. It was seed capital, enough to rent a workspace, enough to acquire materials, enough to begin setting up operations. He established a workshop, likely near the Hof zum Gutenberg, the old family property whose name he carried, and he began to print, but not Bibles, not yet. Gutenberg's earliest printed products were small, practical, commercially shrewd. Among the first identifiable items attributed to his press, a poem about the Last Judgment, the so-called Sibylline Bull, printed as a single-sheet broadside, likely around 1452 or 1453. He also produced a Latin grammar textbook, the Ars Minor of Aelius Donatus, a standard school text that had been in continuous use for over 1,000 years, a text for which there was reliable ongoing demand. And then there were the indulgences. The Catholic Church sold indulgences, printed certificates promising the buyer something, a reduction in the time their soul would spend in purgatory after death. It was an enormous business. Handwritten indulgences were slow and expensive to produce. This limited how many the church could sell. Printed indulgences could be generated by the hundreds, each one identical, except for blank spaces, where a priest would fill in the buyer's name, where a priest would fill in the date of purchase. Gutenberg printed indulgences for the church, starting as early as 1454. They may have been among his most profitable early products. There is something almost too neat about this, the technology that would eventually enable something, the technology that would eventually enable Martin Luther, enable Luther to attack the indulgence system, the technology that would give ordinary people access to the Bible in their own languages, bypassing the church entirely, was first put to commercial use, printing the very documents. The documents that symbolize the church's monopoly on salvation. Gutenberg did not see the irony. He could not have. He was a practical man, trying to fund an expensive dream. The church was a willing customer. These early products proved something, proved that the technology worked at a commercial scale. Grammars and broadsides and indulgences were profitable, but they were small, limited. They did not require the full capacity of Gutenberg's system. They did not require the hundreds of thousands of individual type pieces. They did not require the coordinated labor of multiple workers. They did not require the vast quantities of ink and paper that his press was capable of consuming. What Gutenberg wanted, what he had perhaps always wanted, was to print an entire Bible, the complete Latin Vulgate, both Testaments, over 1,000 pages, a book that every church in Europe needed, and almost none could afford. It would be the most ambitious publishing project. The most ambitious publishing project ever attempted. It would prove something beyond any doubt. It would prove that the age of the scribe was over. It would also cost a fortune, and Gutenberg did not have one. A man named Johannes Fust was not a fool. He was a Mainz citizen of considerable means. He was a goldsmith by training. a money lender and merchant by practice, a man who recognized an opportunity when one presented itself. Sometime around 1450 something happened. Fust and Gutenberg entered into a financial arrangement. This arrangement would shape both their lives. This arrangement would ultimately shape the history of printing itself. The terms, as later reconstructed from court testimony, were straightforward in structure, devastating in consequence. Fust lent Gutenberg 800 guilders. To grasp the scale of this amount, a skilled craftsman in mid-15th century Germany earned roughly 10 to 15 guilders a year. 800 guilders was a sum large enough to buy several houses. The interest rate was 6% annually. And the collateral, the security against which the loan was guaranteed, was Gutenberg's equipment, his press, his type, his molds, everything. A second loan of the same amount followed, ostensibly earmarked for the operating expenses of the Bible project, wages for workers, purchase of paper and vellum, ink and other consumables, with 1,600 guilders in total investment. Fust had effectively bankrolled the entire enterprise. The question that historians have debated for centuries is whether Fust understood from the beginning, whether he understood what he was doing. Was he a patron of innovation, a man willing to risk a substantial fortune, risk it on a visionary craftsman's unproven technology, or was he a calculating investor? An investor who recognized that the collateral, the equipment itself, was worth more than the loan. An investor who understood that if Gutenberg failed to repay, if he failed to repay on time, Fust would end up owning something, the most valuable technology in Europe, for a fraction of its true value. The honest answer is no one knows. The surviving evidence supports either reading. What is known is that Fust was not passive. He was not a passive investor. He took an active interest in the workshop. He visited, he observed, he saw the type being cast, the ink being mixed, the press being operated, and at some point during these visits, he introduced a young man to the operation, a calligrapher he knew from Paris, a man of extraordinary skill with a pen, a man who could translate something, the beauty of manuscript lettering into the new medium of metal type. That young man was Peter Schoeffer. His arrival would change everything. Gutenberg accepted Fust's money because he had no alternative. The Bible project consumed resources at a rate that his grammar books did not sustain, a rate that his indulgences did not sustain. He needed a financier. In accepting Fust's terms, he had done something that contradicted every instinct he had cultivated. He had cultivated these instincts over 20 years of secrecy. He had given another man something, a legal claim on his life's work. The presses began to run, the Bible began to take shape, page by painstaking page, and the interest on Fust's loans began to accumulate, quietly, relentlessly, like water rising behind a dam. The production that began in Gutenberg's workshop around 1452 was unlike anything the world had ever seen, not because of its technology, though that was revolutionary, but because of its ambition. Gutenberg was not printing a pamphlet. He was not printing a grammar book. He was attempting to mechanically reproduce something, the most important text in Western civilization, and he intended the result to be something indistinguishable from or superior to the finest manuscripts produced by the best scribes in Europe. The scale was immense. The complete Bible ran to 1,282 pages, bound in 2 volumes. Each page was set in 2 columns. The early pages used 40 lines per column, but Gutenberg soon increased this to 42, almost certainly to reduce the total number of pages, almost certainly to save paper. This seemingly minor adjustment gave the work something, its enduring name, the 42-line Bible, to reproduce the dense, formal texture. The dense, formal texture of the Gothic liturgical scripts that readers expected in a Bible. Gutenberg designed a typeface of astonishing complexity. It was not simply 26 letters, not simply upper and lower case. His font contained roughly 290 distinct characters, including ligatures in which two or more letters are joined into a single typepiece, abbreviations common in Latin manuscript tradition, variant forms of the same letter, used to adjust spacing within a line. The goal was justified margins, perfectly straight edges on both the left and right sides, straight edges on both sides of each column. Gutenberg achieved this not through crude spacing, but through the typographic equivalent of something, a calligrapher's eye, selecting from his vast character set to fill each line with mathematical precision. The workshop employed roughly 20 workers. 2 presses operated simultaneously, each one printing different sections of the Bible in parallel. This was not sequential production, page 1, then page 2, then page 3. It was concurrent production, with multiple gatherings of pages, progressing through composition, proofing, correction, printing and drying, all at the same time. Managing this workflow required organizational sophistication that rivaled the text itself. The paper alone consumed staggering quantities of material. Roughly 180 copies of the Bible were printed, approximately 135 on paper, and 45 on vellum. A single vellum copy required something, the skins of about 170 calves. The paper copies, while cheaper, still demanded thousands of large sheets, produced at rag paper mills along the Rhine, and imported in bulk. And through all of this, the casting, the composition, the inking, the pressing, the drying, the collating, Gutenberg maintained his insistence on quality. His insistence bordered on obsession. The letter impressions are deep and even, the ink is uniformly black, the margins are consistent, the registration, the alignment of text. The alignment of text on the front and back of each sheet is remarkably accurate for a process being performed for the first time in human history. He also made a calculated aesthetic decision. The printed pages left blank spaces, where hand-painted decorative initials could be added, where marginal flourishes could be added, where rubrication could be added. After printing, by a trained illuminator, each copy of the Bible, though mechanically identical in its text, would be individually decorated. The effect was extraordinary. To an untrained eye, a finished copy, A finished copy of the Gutenberg Bible looked like something. It looked like a manuscript. It took careful examination to realize something, that the text had not been written by a human hand. The project consumed roughly 2 years, 2 years of relentless, painstaking, unprecedented labor. And during every one of those months, Johann Fust's interest was compounding, a fact that Gutenberg seems to have ignored or believed he could deal with later. Outside the workshop in the streets of Mainz, the pages were beginning to circulate, and someone very important was paying attention. Peter Schoeffer arrived in Gutenberg's workshop. Arrived as a solution to a technical problem, he became the instrument of something, its creator's transformation. Schoeffer was a young man, probably in his mid-20s when he joined the operation, though the exact date of his arrival is uncertain. What is certain is his background. Before coming to Mainz, he had worked as a professional scribe and a calligrapher in Paris, copying manuscripts for the university book trade. His handwriting was exceptional. He understood letter forms, not as abstract shapes, but as living elements of a visual tradition stretching back centuries. The thick strokes and thin strokes, the precise angles, the rhythmic spacing, that distinguished competent copying from genuine artistry. This was exactly what Gutenberg needed. The typeface for the Bible had to convince readers, convince them that they were looking at something. The work of a master scribe. Designing such a typeface required someone who could bridge 2 worlds, the world of the pen and the world of the punch. Schoeffer could look at a page of manuscript text and understand which visual qualities needed preservation in metal, and which could be adapted or discarded. His calligraphic expertise almost certainly influenced something, the design of the type used in the 42-line Bible, and his understanding of page layout may have shaped its visual architecture as well. But Schoeffer was more than a type designer. He was a quick study, working alongside Gutenberg. He absorbed the technical processes that the older man had spent decades developing in secret, the composition of the alloy, the operation of the hand mold, the formulation of the ink, the mechanics of the press. He learned everything, and he learned it with the full access that Gutenberg, for the first time in his career, was forced to grant, because the scale of the Bible project demanded delegation. This was the architecture of the situation. A master craftsman aging, having spent decades in secrecy, now forced to share his knowledge, share it with an apprentice. The apprentice, young and talented, learning rapidly. The financier visiting regularly, watching, observing, understanding the value of what was being created. The Bible was nearly finished. The most magnificent book ever produced was taking shape, page by perfect page. Around the year 1455, the Gutenberg Bible was completed, and it was breathtaking to hold a copy, as the few people who have been permitted to do can attest, is to encounter something that seems to exist outside of time. The pages are large, roughly the dimensions of a modern broadsheet newspaper. The text is set in 2 columns, 42 lines each, in a typeface so precisely cut and so evenly printed that the eye initially refuses to believe something, that it was not written by hand. The ink, nearly 600 years later, remains a deep, saturated black. has not faded, has not browned, has not cracked or flaked from the surface of the paper. The margins are generous and clean. The overall impression is one of something, absolute authority, a book that looks the way Scripture is supposed to look, weighty and permanent beyond the reach of human error. Approximately 180 copies were produced. The vellum copies, about 45 of them, were luxury objects intended for something, cathedrals, wealthy monasteries, powerful patrons. The paper copies, numbering roughly 135, were still expensive, but within reach of a broader market. Prosperous churches, university libraries, affluent private buyers. Each copy left Gutenberg's workshop as something, a stack of printed sheets, unbound and undecorated. Buyers then sent their copies to something, local bookbinders and illuminators, who added hand-painted initials, decorative borders, and rubricated headings. According to the owner's taste and budget, this meant that no two copies of the Gutenberg Bible are identical in their final form. The text is the same, the decoration is unique, they are paradoxically something, both the first mass-produced books in European history and singular works of art. The commercial reception was immediate. We know this because of a letter. In March 1455, an Italian humanist and diplomat named Enea Silvio Piccolomini wrote from the imperial diet in Frankfurt to a colleague in Rome. He described seeing something, sample pages of a remarkable Bible. The script he wrote was exceedingly clean and correct. The letters could be read without effort, even without spectacles. He reported that 158 copies had been completed, though some sources say he wrote 180, and that every single one had already been spoken for. Buyers were lined up before the ink was dry. Piccolomini's letter is one of something, the most important documents in the history of printing, not because of what it says about the Bible's quality, though it confirms what anyone looking at the book can see, but because of what it does not say. Nowhere in the letter does Piccolomini mention something, the name Gutenberg. He attributes the Bible to no individual. He describes the technology, praises the result, reports the demand. The Creator is invisible. This absence foreshadows something, the erasure that was about to occur. The Bible, Gutenberg's Bible, the book that proved the printing press worked, the book that justified 2 decades of secrecy and struggle and risk, would reach the world without something, without his name on it. Because even as Piccolomini was writing his letter, even as the final sheets were being pulled from the press and hung to dry in Mainz workshop, Johann Fust was preparing something, preparing his move. The interest on the loans had been accumulating for 5 years. Gutenberg had been pouring every resource into something, the project leaving nothing with which to repay his creditor. The Bible was finished, the technology was proven, the equipment was worth far more now than the sum Fust had originally lent. Fust, who had watched and waited and learned, was ready to collect. In November of 1455, Johann Fust filed suit against Johannes Gutenberg in the ecclesiastical court of the Archbishop of Mainz. The timing was precise in its own way. The Bible was complete, The technology was proven, the market was hungry. Fust's claim was straightforward. He had lent Gutenberg 800 guilders for the development of the printing equipment and a further 800 for operating expenses related to the Bible project. Interest had been accumulating for approximately 5 years. The total debt, including compounded interest, now exceeded something. 2,000 guilders. Fust demanded full repayment, or failing that, surrender of the collateral. The collateral specified in their agreement. The collateral was everything. The presses, the type, the molds, the ink, the unsold copies of the Bible, the complete infrastructure of the most advanced technology workshop in Europe. Gutenberg's defense, as far as can be reconstructed from fragmentary records, rested on technical arguments about how the loans were structured and dispersed. The court reviewed the terms of the loan, the interest calculations, the use of the funds. A judgment was rendered. The collateral passed to the creditor. This is how such matters were resolved. Not through blame, through law. The financial arrangement had terms. The terms were not fulfilled. The agreement specified what would happen. In this circumstance, this was what happened. Fust did not waste a single day. Together with Peter Schoeffer, he immediately established something, a new printing firm. The Fust and Schoeffer workshop occupied the premises and equipment that Gutenberg had built. The workers who had learned their craft under Gutenberg now answered to something, new management. The presses continued printing, the Bible type continued being used. What had been one workshop became two. What had been Gutenberg's became Fust's. In August of 1457, the workshop produced something, a major work, the Mainz Psalter, a lavishly printed book of Psalms. The work featured something, large decorative initials, printed in 2 colors, red and blue, achieved through a technically demanding process. That may have been something, Schoeffer's own innovation. And at the back of the book, it carried something that no printed book had ever contained before, a colophon, a printed statement identifying the makers of the work. The colophon named something, Johannes Fust and Peter Schoeffer. It identified Mainz as the place of production. It gave the date. It was in effect something, the first printed trademark in history. Gutenberg's name appeared nowhere. What does a man do when something happens, when his life's work is taken from him? In Gutenberg's case, the answer appears to be something. He starts again. The years immediately following the lawsuit are the most hotly debated period in Gutenberg's scholarship. The documentary evidence is sparse, contradictory, and endlessly argued over, but a plausible reconstruction, the one supported by the strongest combination of circumstantial evidence, suggests that Gutenberg did not simply do something, did not simply accept his dispossession and retire. There is evidence that he retained or acquired something, enough equipment to establish a smaller printing operation. A Mainz citizen named Conrad Humery appears in later records as possessing printing materials that he acknowledged had belonged to Gutenberg. This suggests that Humery either did something, either lent Gutenberg money, or partnered with him in some capacity after the Fust lawsuit, providing the capital for a modest workshop. More intriguing is something, the connection to Bamberg, a Bible printed in 36 lines per page, as opposed to the 42 lines of the famous Gutenberg Bible was produced around this period using type that bears something, a strong stylistic resemblance to Gutenberg's earlier work. The 36-line Bible, as scholars call it, has been tentatively linked to something, a printing workshop in Bamberg, roughly 150 miles east of Mainz. Whether Gutenberg personally operated this workshop, supplied the type to another printer, or had no direct involvement at all remains unresolved. The evidence is suggestive, not conclusive. What is clear is something. The contrast. Fust and Chauffeur were printing something, Salters and canon law texts, with Gutenberg's equipment building a commercial empire, establishing distribution networks that reached as far as Paris. They had the infrastructure, they had the capital, they had the contacts. Gutenberg, if he was printing at all, was doing so on the margins, smaller jobs, inferior equipment, a fraction of the capacity he had once commanded, and yet he continued. Whatever else we may not know about Gutenberg, during these years we know this, he did not stop. The man who had spent 2 decades perfecting a technology in secret, who had mortgaged everything to bring it into being, who had watched it taken from him by legal force. That man picked up whatever tools remained and went back to work. There is a book that bears something, Gutenberg's Shadow. Though like everything else in his story, it refuses to carry something, his name. The Catholicon, a massive Latin dictionary and encyclopedia compiled in the 13th century by a Dominican friar named Giovanni Balbi. It was a reference work, dense and practical, used by scholars and clergy across Europe. Producing a manuscript copy required something, months of scribal labor. Printing it was something, an obvious commercial opportunity. Someone in Mainz around 1460 did exactly that. The printed Catholicon runs to something. Over 700 pages, the type is smaller and less elaborate than the Bible type, suggesting either something, a different workshop, or a deliberate reduction in cost and ambition. The printing quality is competent, but not extraordinary. It was a workhorse book, not a showcase. What makes it significant is the colophon. At the back of the Catholicon, a printed note declares something, that this book was produced with the help of the Most High, at whose nod the tongues of infants become eloquent, and who often reveals to the lowly what he conceals from the wise. It goes on to praise something, the wondrous agreement, proportion, and harmony of punches and types, language that explicitly describes the printing process. It identifies Mainz as the place of origin. It attributes the achievement to something, divine inspiration. It does not name something, the printer. Scholars have debated the Catholicon's authorship for centuries. The type has been linked to Gutenberg through detailed typographical analysis, but the attribution is not universally accepted. Some argue it was produced by something, a different printer, using type acquired from Gutenberg's dispersed materials. Others maintain that the language of the colophon, particularly its emphasis on something, the harmony of punches and types, and its tone of quiet pride, sounds like a man describing his own achievement, while remaining characteristically unnamed. If Gutenberg did print the Catholicon, it represents something, his final major work, a large, ambitious book, produced without Fust's money, without Chauffeur's calligraphy, without the resources of the workshop he had lost. It would mean that something happened. even after dispossession, even after the upheaval of the city, even in his late 60s. With diminished means and failing health, he was still printing, still working, still refusing to stop. The colophon praised something. The technology, it praised God. It praised Mainz. It did not praise something. The man. And perhaps that tells us something, everything we need to know about where Gutenberg stood in the autumn of his life, present in his work, absent from its credit. Invisible in the revolution he had started. While Gutenberg faded into something, documentary silence, the technology he created was spreading across Europe, at a pace that would have seemed something impossible just years before. The upheaval of Mainz in 1462, a military conflict that disrupted the city, scattered the trained printers who had learned their craft in Gutenberg's workshop or in Fust and Schoeffer's operation. That succeeded it. These printers carried something, the knowledge with them. They traveled to Strasbourg, to Bamberg, to Cologne, to Basel, to Augsburg. They crossed the Alps into Italy. Printers established themselves in Rome. In 1465, by 1469, Venice had its first press. By 1470, Paris followed. By 1473, printers were working in Budapest, in Krakow, in Barcelona. The technology broke free of its birthplace, and spread across the continent at a speed that no commercial expansion could have matched. Destruction of the city's stability had achieved what something happened. Commerce might have taken decades to accomplish. The presses multiplied. The knowledge could not be recaptured. The system Gutenberg had built was designed to spread, and it did in January of 1465. 3 years after Mainz was disrupted, the Archbishop granted something, Johannes Gutenberg, the title of Hofmann, a gentleman of the court. The title came with something, tangible benefits, an annual provision of clothing, grain, and wine, exemption from certain taxes and civic obligations, a formal position within the Archbishop's household. It was not wealth, it was not fame, but for a man who had spent years in financial uncertainty, watching others profit from his creation. It was something. A modest pension, recognition from the authority of the city he had built his work in, a way to live his final years without absolute hardship. Why the Archbishop extended this recognition is unclear. Perhaps it was genuine respect for Gutenberg's contribution to the city's renown. Mainz was already becoming something, known across Europe as the birthplace of printing. Perhaps it was a political gesture, a way for the Archbishop to associate himself with an achievement that brought prestige to his territory. Perhaps it was something else entirely, an acknowledgement, a quiet apology, a recognition of what had been lost and what remained. Whatever the motive, the appointment is something, the only formal recognition. that Gutenberg received during his lifetime. No guild honored him. No university awarded him a title. No city erected a monument, the man who had made it possible for European scholars to publish their ideas, for churches to own Bibles, for universities to distribute textbooks, received a modest court pension from the Archbishop. A court title, a modest recognition, that came late and quietly. Gutenberg was now in something, his early 70s, his health was almost certainly declining. The average lifespan for a man of his era and class who survived to adulthood was roughly 60 to 65 years. He had exceeded that expectation. He had also outlived something, most of the people. Who could testify to what he had achieved? The workers had dispersed across Europe. Fust would die within a year, likely during an outbreak of plague, while on a book-selling trip in Paris. The original workshops were gone. What remained was something. His name, his court title, his small pension, and a reputation. That existed mostly in the memories of aging people. He lived quietly. There is no record of drama, no great deeds. He is simply something. An old man living in the city where his work began. The years pass, his hair grows white, his movements slow. The court pension arrives regularly. Clothing, grain, wine. It is modest, but it is something. In February of 1468, Gutenberg dies. He is approximately 73 years old. The details of his death are not recorded. This is not unusual. Most people's deaths are not recorded. In historical documents, the significant deaths get recorded. The deaths of kings and nobles, the deaths of important clergy, the deaths of most people, including most craftsmen, are not recorded. They happen quietly. The person dies. They are buried. Life continues for the living. He is buried in a local church. The church is later rebuilt. The old burial place is lost. Eventually, no one remembers where he was buried. The grave markers wear away. The stones crumble. The records fade. The specific location of Gutenberg's burial becomes unknown. The person who made something possible, made it possible to preserve knowledge forever, left behind almost nothing. Almost no personal record, no diary, no letters, no testament in his own hand. His life is reconstructed from court documents, from loan agreements, from witness testimony, and from the objects his workshops produced. He is known not through his words, but through his debts, through legal disputes, through the equipment that was seized from him. Yet what he created persisted longer than his grave. His presses were already spreading across Europe. His methods were being used by others. His technology was in motion. He did not see this continuation. He could not have. He died in his 70s, far away from the cities where printing was spreading. But the system he built was a kind of record in itself. Every page printed after him was a record of his influence. Every book that used his methods was a record of his thinking. Every press that operated on the principles he developed was a record of his genius. the specific man, his face, his voice, his final words, these are lost. But the work persists. After Gutenberg's death, printing spreads rapidly across Europe. The technology cannot be stopped or contained. Within decades, presses operate. In hundreds of cities, within a century, millions of books exist, where centuries earlier there had been thousands. The consequence is something. Knowledge becomes abundant. Universities can distribute textbooks. Scholars can read each other's work. Scientific progress accelerates. Because scientists can publish their findings and have them read by scientists in other cities, language becomes standardized. Because printers need consistency to serve large markets, national languages begin to crystallize into the recognizable forms they hold today. German, French, English, Italian. The Protestant Reformation becomes possible because Martin Luther's writings can be printed and distributed widely. Without the printing press, the Reformation could not have happened, could not have happened at the speed it happened, could not have happened at the scale it happened. The religious upheaval that changed the world would not have been possible. Without a technology that could make thousands of identical copies of a text. But these are large historical consequences. They are presented calmly as the natural outcome of a technology that makes copying possible. Gutenberg himself never saw most of them. He died before Martin Luther posted his thesis. He died before the scientific revolution. He died before the Enlightenment. He could not have imagined what his invention would enable. For more than a century after Gutenberg's death, it is unclear who invented printing. Different cities claim something credit. Haarlem in the Netherlands promotes a local legend about a man named something, Lorenz Coster, who supposedly invented printing. Before Gutenberg, Strasbourg points to something, its trial records. Bamberg hints at something, involvement. Different printers claimed something, to have invented the technology. The history becomes confused, gradually through the work of historians and scholars over many decades. Evidence accumulates, documents are discovered, court records are examined, typographical analysis is performed. The evidence points consistently to Gutenberg. His primacy is established by the 18th century. Gutenberg's role in inventing printing is broadly accepted. By the 19th century, his name is synonymous with something: the printing press, a reputation so firmly established that no competing claim can dislodge it. It took nearly 400 years. The man who invented something, the technology of permanent record keeping, was himself nearly lost to the record, but eventually he is remembered. Of the approximately 180 Gutenberg Bibles printed around 1455, roughly 49 complete or nearly complete copies survive today. They are scattered in something, libraries and collections around the world. Each one is treasured, each one is carefully preserved, behind glass, in climate-controlled rooms, examined by experts. If you were able to hold one of these pages, you would notice something: the ink. Nearly 600 years later, it remains black, undimmed, unfaded. The paper has survived. The craftsmanship is evident in every perfectly aligned letter. The margins are generous, the proportions are balanced, the overall effect is something, one of permanence and authority, a book that looks the way Scripture is supposed to look. That quality is still visible in the surviving copies. Each copy is unique in something. Its decoration, each was hand-decorated after printing. Some received something, lavish painted initials in gold leaf and fine brushwork. Others received something, simple red paragraph marks. But the printed text is identical across all copies. They are paradoxically something, both mass-produced books and singular works of art. The narrative now begins to release you from the story. We have traveled through something, centuries of work. We have watched the careful craftsmanship of monks copying manuscripts, copying them letter by letter. We have seen the precision work of the coin mint. We have observed the innovation of the printing press, observed it develop slowly through experimentation and thought. We have watched the Bible take shape page by perfect page. We have witnessed the spread of knowledge across a continent. We have seen the person who started it all become invisible in the revolution he had started. No drama, no final revelation, simply acknowledgement that something happened. The story has unfolded and now concludes. The story is complete. You have witnessed something, centuries of work. You have felt something, the cold of the scriptorium. You have experienced something, the rhythm of typecasting. You have watched pages accumulate. In the workshop, you have seen the tension and resolution of the legal dispute presented in neutral language. You have witnessed something, the scattering of the printers across Europe. Let all of this settle now, like the cooling metal, like the hardening ink, like the pages hanging quiet in the dark workshop. After the day's work is finished, the presses ran, the pages came. The world changed, but that was long ago, far away in a time when books were precious and knowledge was rare. Now let your breathing slow, your eyes grow heavy, your mind becomes still. The story is complete. There is nothing left to hold on to, no ending to reach, no question unanswered. Simply let yourself drift. The night is long, sleep is waiting. Close your eyes and let the image of those quiet workshops, those careful hands, those pages slowly accumulating, fade gently into darkness. You are safe. You are warm. You are home. Let sleep come. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to know, only rest. Sleep now.